Hello, Turkish films with Turkish films chess. This is Daily Chess Analysis, Episode 4. Normally I don't do this, but I'm going to show the scores. We both played like garbage, 65.5 and 85.8. That could have gone either way. Definitely sums up the game. Blundering back and forth. He blundered twice, I blundered 4 times. So let's check it out. What we're going to see in this game, from my analysis, is just basically priorities and tactical awareness. And those are the two things that really brought this game down. Okay, so he played d4, and I played knight f6, and he played e3, a move that I don't face often. If people are going to play like the Kali system, they normally play knight f3 first. And so to my mind, this looks like a London without his bishop here. And so I was tempted, after playing d5, which is what I play against the London, to then play c5. And I was thinking about c5, and I was like, well, I don't know this, and maybe the bishop being inside the pawn chain makes this not a good move. I wasn't sure. But I also saw that I can get my light square bishop out, which doesn't normally happen in openings like this. So I took the opportunity to get my bishop out. Computer, of course, recommends c5 instead. c5 is good, because if he takes, I can take back, and these kinds of things actually happen in the game. Okay, he develops his knight. I played e6, right? Getting my bishop out of the pawn chain before doing this. He played bishop e2. I also thought bishop d3 was better. That's where his bishop belongs, challenging my bishop, which I've so gracefully got outside of the pawn chain. And after I finally play c5, takes, he then castles. So we can see I have both my bishops out on active squares. I'm ready to castle next move. I have more pawns in the center. He then plays, it was my move, sorry, I forgot that he castled. So I castled here, and I should have played knight b to d7. Now the moves that were going through my head were knight b to d7, queen c7, and bishop d6, all of which stop his knight from appearing on e5. I know his knight doesn't really want to go there right now, but just to stop the option. Because if his knight can go there and then he can play f4 to really solidify that knight, it's pretty strong. But I just castled here. He played a3. And the threat is to play b5 as far as I was aware. And so to kind of make b5 look a little sillier, I moved my bishop back first. But knight d7 first is better. It stops this move and also forces him to play this move to get my bishop back. Okay, and he played bishop d3 finally, challenging my bishop. And I wasn't sure if I was supposed to move it here or here. Here there's a pin, and he has to play h3 and then g4 if he wants to get rid of it. I thought that he's weakening his king side too much, and my king side is strong enough to withstand this potential pawn storm coming at me. And the idea of bishop g6 is if he takes it, to take back with the h-pawn. And eventually, maybe after moving my knight somewhere, playing f6, king to f7, and my rook and queen will line up against the king in the future. And that seems kind of far-fetched, but these things actually happen rather quickly in lines like this. The computer thinks, farther ahead than I do, and wants me to play bishop e4 or knight e4, basically not giving up the center. But I played bishop g4, and this kind of thing happened. And he goes back, which I thought was really weird, that you'd bring your bishop here, play it out, and then bring it back. It's just kind of a waste of time. So I knew that move couldn't be very good, and so I developed my last piece. He's wasting time, so I should use time to the best of my ability. And he played knight b5, attacking this pawn, or attacking this bishop. And my bishop has an important job being here, so I go back. And when I saw this formation here, I got a little uncomfortable because this rook has no hopes ever. And so I kind of thought maybe instead of playing my bishop out or bringing my knights out or things like this, playing bishop d6, I should have brought my rook here first. Then my bishop could sit behind him. Okay, and he played b3. And this knight has nowhere to go because he's played a3, so I attacked it with a6, which is the best move. And I'm kind of running through the moves fairly quickly. The opening phase isn't super interesting, and we end up just trading little advantages back and forth. Although with moves like bishop e2 coming back this way, he really ends up weakening his own position, which is why I have the advantage here. I'm kind of dictating where his pieces are going. And this square just stops the c-pawn and kind of is, again, not really holding onto the center as strongly as he could. And here I played bishop a7. And this is the main, one of the main mistakes, in my opinion, that kind of demonstrates my lack of understanding in this position. So I see that my bishop is pointing at the king here, and that's the only check that I have in the position, so checks are taken care of. Capture is the next thing we should look at. That's the only capture I have, and doesn't do much for me. One thing it does do, however, is releases the knight's grip on this square. So connecting and looking at checks and captures first, I start to kind of connect the dots that my two most forcing moves both have something to do with the h2 square. And this really makes a move like Queen c7, the computer's top recommendation, super obvious. Because now the threat is to take this knight, and if you were to take back, there would be checkmate on h2, because the king would be trapped. Let's look at that. If takes, whoops, let's say he plays any move. This is if he ignores the threat. Then takes, and if takes, he gets mated. Also in the same way, if you were to take with the pawn, he would get mated just the same. So his king side isn't really helping him over here, he's just getting checkmated. So after, if you were to waste a move, let's say not even a move like this, let's say he were to develop his bishop, that's a very sensible move. After taking, he sees that this is checkmate, and would have to play a move like g3 to stop checkmate. I could take, he could take back, and I'm just up a piece in this position, easily winning. Again, I still have central pawns, my king is better than his. And the game's just kind of over. So it was kind of this lack of connecting the dots of that's my only capture, that's my only check. And really stressing about this rook over here. I was like, oh, I'm happy I played bishop e8, and I was fairly confident it was the best move, but I didn't like that it had this consequence. So my idea was, let's get this rook into the game as fast as possible. So bringing the rook out right away. And it's funny, my bishop actually ends up coming back later in the game. So yeah, that's pretty rough. Okay, he plays bishop e2, very sensible move, and rook c8. And now I was like, yes, everything's fine. I'm super happy now, because this was like driving me nuts, and now I finally got rid of it. And I'm still, you can see, I'm still winning by 1 in this position. So bishop a7, while it was bad, it's not the end of the world. I still have the advantage. So knight d4 comes in, releasing this, and so I took. Better would have been to bring the bishop back. I like my bishop. I want to keep it, and I can even target weak pawns, like the c2 pawn here. But I gave it up. He took with the knight, which is a great move, getting his other knight into the center if he so wishes. And here I thought, what is my goal? What is my plan? I noticed that this pawn should probably move, and just didn't see that, tactically speaking, after e5, knight captures c6 would win the pawn, because no matter what I take back with, this pawn's undefended. Which really explains why the computer's best move is queen to e7 instead. Queen to e7 here defends this pawn, so I can push it. So a lot of the stuff is just the right move order and having the right priorities. I should still develop my pieces and connect my rooks and get everything going for myself. Okay, but instead, in the game, I played e5. He didn't see it either, that he could take this. And now I came to my senses, saw that that hung a pawn, and attacked the knight. He moves the knight back, which I was pretty happy to see. That's kind of an awkward knight over there. And here again, I'm just not connecting the dots. This whole game, I'm sitting here trying to find ways to utilize the advantages that I think that I have, when really what I need to do is get those advantages in the first place and build up my position and my strength. And so here the move is just rook fd8, lining up with the queen, preparing to push pawns in the center. But I just pushed pawns in the center right away. Takes, and he played queen d2. I fully expected just mass exchanges in the center, and because of these weird maneuvers, like my bishop not being very useful here, hanging a pawn here, I'm already not feeling so great about the game, and so I'd be super happy if we just traded everything off and just agreed to a draw, because I just feel so bad about this game so far. Okay, now rook fd8, one move too late, not going on the open file, but defending this pawn. Now the reason behind this, I think, is somewhat sound. I want to defend this pawn so my queen can do something else, so my queen can have a job. Because my queen doesn't really belong behind this pawn, just defending it. My queen belongs around the board, attacking stuff and making threats. Okay, rook ad1. And I move my queen as advertised. This is just not a good square to move my queen to. And the computer would rather I just adjust my course and move my rook back to where it should have gone before on the open line. Okay, knight f4 attacking my queen. And queen to d6. Attacking this knight, keeping it on this pawn, and defending the center. He moved his knight back, blockading my isolated pawn. That makes a lot of sense. And here I start to go wrong. Clearly, the knight can go here and attack my queen. But I instead decided to try to take care of this knight here. This ties my queen down to the defense of this knight. And so after he attacks it, it very much limits the squares that my queen can go to. And queen c7, blunder. I should be attacking things. I thought, hey, look, I'm attacking a pawn. It doesn't really matter when your opponent's threatening checkmate. And this is actually not a very good move. It's good. He does want to end up with a queen on g5, but like a lot of my bad moves, he's just playing these moves in the wrong order. Taking this knight first would very much misplace my queen. Now when he plays queen to g5, there's not a lot of ways to save it. To save this position, there's approximately 0 ways. Like it's actually really bad. He's winning by 4 in that position. He's picking up major material. His rook's going to appear on some line sometime soon, and my queen's going to be very, very misplaced. But he played queen g5. I found the move that doesn't get checkmated, so good for me. And he played rook c1, defending the pawn. That was hanging. And now you can see it pretty much equaled out. He's blundering, I'm blundering, everything's fine. Bishop b8. Notice that my bishop came back, and I was like, hey, look, that checkmate threat. And at this point, I was kind of like, wait a second, couldn't I have played that move earlier? So that felt kind of bad. But f4 defends checkmate. That's good. It also kind of makes the queen a little bit more stuck, however, which is what I noticed. And knight e4 kind of tries to take advantage of that. The queen doesn't have a whole lot of squares here that it would like to go to. Queen g4 makes a lot of sense. And here I played queen to b6. I think my idea was that I wanted to bring my queen in to defend because I was still scared of checkmate, even though checkmate's not an issue here. Yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, the move. King h1's a blunder. And the reason king h6 is a blunder is because this pin here of queen to e6 is actually very, very strong. The queen can't go anywhere that would defend this. That's reasonable. So if queen h5, which you're thinking, that defends the pawn and gets out of the pin, loses for tactical reasons, I can just take that knight. And if you're wondering what, he takes your queen. There's actually queen or knight to g3 check, which is a check to the king and the queen, which would recuperate the queen. Meaning that after I play queen e3, if he tries this move, he loses his knight by force, at minimum. So there's nowhere here that he can break the pin. It's just kind of not a thing here. And any square the knight would like to go to give me check is actually sufficiently defended, and that one's even just cut off the board. So this would be a very strong move. You can see in this position I'm up 2, because I'm just picking up a knight, minimum. Instead, I played knight c3. Again, I was not in the greatest state of mind here. I was just hoping that we could just draw and just be done with this game and trade a bunch of pieces off. Knight c3 totally misses the opportunity and hands the advantage back over to white. He takes. I take with the pawn. Okay? Taking with the rook just makes this equal because I'm going to double up against this guy here. He played knight captures g7. His idea was to win a pawn. It's kind of a tricky move because after takes, he has the idea of f5, which he thought wins a knight because it's pinned and I can't move it. It turns out the move rook to d4 here is very good because the queen doesn't have this square and would have to resort to a square like this, after which h6 would force the queen off of this line, which would save the knight. It's not so straightforward, but here black's winning by 7. So the move that he played, knight captures g7, went from the advantage him being 0.6 to me having the advantage of 3 because he just gave away a knight for virtually nothing. Of course, I didn't see it. Otherwise, this game would be somewhat interesting. I played queen f6. Again, here I only had 30 seconds on my clock, so I don't blame myself too much, but still, I should just see that there's only 3 squares the queen can go to. So of course he takes the knight. I take back with the queen. Queen h4, and with just a few seconds left on the clock, I played rook d6. Yeah, which just loses. Every move loses. And then he just ends the game very quickly. So we can see here that probably the most blunders I've had in a game in a long time, and a lot of them came from just not understanding what's going on. Bishop a7 values the development of my rook over weakening his position. Oh, by the way, like in a position like this, if you play queen c7, the computer's recommending g3. And computers hate playing moves like this because it just weakens his king so much. And now, black is winning by 2. And material is still equal. Material is still the same. But because he's weakened his king so much, this is just an overwhelming advantage, basically. Because his king is going to have a lot of struggles throughout the rest of the game. We'll go to details so we can look at the percentage accuracy for the moves. So there you can see the accuracy for each of the moves. Queen's pawn opening. 3 knight c3 is the move that left the book. And you can see the times for all the moves as well. This has been Turkish Films with Daily Chess Analysis, Episode 4. I hope you guys enjoyed. Kind of hard to enjoy. That game was pretty crazy, pretty nuts. But there's that. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. And check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/TurkishFilms. Aloha.